Oh, the crystal balls are coming in now. Are the Miami Hurricanes going to land a verbal commitment from four-star wide receiver Ny Carr?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It's a big game this Saturday, ACC opener, night game against Georgia Tech, and it's also a big recruiting opportunity for the Canes. I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much to the everydayers who make Locked On Canes your first listen each and every day. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We've talked a lot over the last more than a week about Ny Carr. Four-star wide receiver, standout out of Colquitt County High School in Georgia, and how ever since he decommitted from the Georgia Bulldogs a little over a week and a half ago, the Hurricanes seem to have been the team that was trending the highest, and now those trends are turning into predictions. Couple of the most prominent and notable national recruiting experts out there, not localized guys who cover one team and, would theoretically have a bias towards anybody. National experts from two of the biggest publications have dropped crystal balls or predictions for the Miami Hurricanes to land Ny Carr. Our guy, Steve Wiltfong, the Grim Reaper, dropped a Fong ball for Carr to the Hurricanes. Steve Wiltfong, the director of recruiting for 24/7 Sports. And I was watching Steve's comments about Miami. He says the Hurricanes have been rising here, and they're the program that he's hearing the most about when it comes to Carr. And he logged that crystal ball with a 6 of 10 certainty, which is a pretty standard, that a little bit above medium certainty. And then the other one who logged a prediction, I think they just call it a prediction on on3.com, but it's their equivalent of the crystal ball. And Chad Simmons from On3 is the Steve Wiltfong equivalent of On3. He's their head of scouting and recruiting. And Simmons has logged a prediction for Miami to land Carr. He says the communication picked up a lot between Carr and the Hurricanes recently, and now the four-star is set to visit Coral Gables this weekend, he said. This will be Carr's first true visit to Miami. He saw the campus once before with his 7-on-7 team, so this weekend is a big one for both parties, he said. There is no timeline for Carr to make his next decision, but Miami has put itself in the best position for the Peach State playmaker. Based on intel from a couple of sources close to his recruitment, I have logged a pick from Miami on the On3 recruiting prediction machine, Simmons said. Carr visited Auburn last week for the Georgia game. He has tripped to Florida State before, and his teammate Landon Thomas is committed to the Seminoles, but Miami has quickly emerged as the team to beat here. Now, here on Locked On Canes, we love Ny Carr, not only because of his hands and his shiftiness, but this dude has some serious acceleration, all right? If you haven't had a chance to watch his sizzle reel from Colquitt County High School, there's a clip that's been going around social media. I shared it on Twitter or X. You can follow us, by the way. Follow the show at Locked On Canes, and we will follow you back. I shared this video at the Locked On Canes account. There's this incredible video going around of a play that Carr made for his high school team, catching a bubble screen, scoring a long touchdown. And they did the sports science on this one. He accelerates to 20.7 miles per hour in just 3.1 seconds. I'm not sure if my car can do that, but Ny Carr can do that. It was incredible. He's 5'11", about 170 pounds. The position that he prominently projects at the college level is slot receiver. But Carr will be the first one to tell you, because he's been talking about this over the last couple of days. Like, don't just call him a slot receiver, because he can play on the outside as well. He's a versatile playmaker. And, if you're an old school Miami Hurricanes football fan, if you watch Carr, you think of the possibilities. A comp to Santana Moss would come to mind with him. If you're more of a new school college football fan, you would think about a guy like Tank Dell, who's now with the Houston Texans. Before that, he was with the Houston Cougars, and Shannon Dawson was his offensive coordinator. Carr can be that type of player in this offense. And listen, I've been feeling pretty good about the way Miami has been trending. Simmons mentioned the timeline in his piece. I'd like to see if the timeline can get accelerated, because the last that I heard, talking to someone close to Carr, was that, he was planning on making his decision, or at least announcing his decision, at the All-American Bowl, which he's been invited to January 7th. So if the timeline stays that way, we're going to have to wait a long time to see any payoff here. But, you never know. Sometimes timelines get changed. Sometimes timelines gets accelerated. And as we mentioned, I think on yesterday's show, the other finalists for Carr, even though Miami appears to be in the lead here, Florida State, Auburn, Colorado, and Penn State are also in the mix. Now, let me update, because Carr will be at the Georgia Tech game this Saturday. Hopefully, the fans show up big time. He sees a great atmosphere out there at Hard Rock Stadium. Hopefully, the team puts on a show, scores a lot of points. Tyler Van Dyke hits some deep passes down the field, and everyone comes away happy because, yes, Ny Carr is not the only blue chip receiver visiting, right? There's some blue chip 2025 guys, but let's just focus on the 2024s for now, because the list keeps getting updated with more names. Carr will be there. 5-star top player in the entire country, wide receiver Jeremiah Smith, who's an Ohio State commit. We all know Miami's trying for the flip. Jeremiah is going to be there. And I love the rest of this guest list for 2024s, even though the other 2024s are a bunch of guys who are already committed to Miami. I think that's perfect, because if you're trying to share the gospel of the U with guys who are, undecided or uncommitted, who better to share that gospel than guys who have already taken that plunge to commit to Miami and can explain to Jeremiah and Nye how, great it is to be part of this family, at least to be, part of the recruiting family. And yeah, a lot of the guys visiting are really tight with Jeremiah Smith, right? Some of his best friends. JoJo Trader, 4-star receiver, Miami commit, is going to be there. He and Jeremiah are high school teammates. Chance Robinson, his former 7-on-7 teammate, 4-star receiver, will be at the game. His teammate safety, Zaquan Patterson, will be there, 4-star safety. 4-star tight end, Elijah Lofton, will be there. And just a quick shout out to Lofton, because I appreciate the trip that he's making. Because listen, a lot of the guys coming to this game are like driving 15 miles or, making like a, 80-minute flight to get down here. Elijah Lofton's coming from Vegas. He's coming from Bishop Gorman. So that's I appreciate, the having to go through airport security and, the 4.5-hour flight you have to take down here. Thank you for that. Linebacker commit Bobby Pruitt will be here, and cornerback commit Romanis O.J. Frederic will be at the game. So, and by the way, I mentioned Zaquan Patterson is going to be at the game. That's big, because we talked a little bit yesterday about there was some chatter and some optimism coming out of the Auburn folks, because he was recently at Auburn for a visit. He went to that same Auburn-Georgia game that Ny Carr also went to. Apparently, it didn't make the best impression on Carr or Zaquan, because Zaquan Patterson, in an interview with CaneSport, kudos to Stephen Wagner for putting this out from CaneSport, Zaquan Patterson reaffirmed his Miami commitment, and he did tell Stephen that he's going to be at the Miami-Georgia Tech game this Saturday. And when Zaquan was talking about his trip to Auburn last weekend, all this chatter from the Auburn folks about how aggressive Hugh Freeze warning, how aggressive he is in trying to flip this player. It sounded to me like Zaquan went to the game more to watch Georgia than to watch Auburn. So I feel pretty good still about where Miami stands with keeping Zaquan Patterson committed in this class. We're going to be answering some of you guys' questions throughout this episode, and I want to talk about something Mario Cristobal said this week on the Mario Cristobal Show about the importance of player leadership, right? That you can only go so far with a coach-driven team. We're only getting started here, folks. We got a lot of good stuff to get to, talking about Miami's offensive efficiency, quarterback play, a little bit more recruiting talk, and some of the important things Mario Cristobal had to say this week. As we like to say, we're only getting started right here. Keep it locked to Locked On Canes. Oh, my friends, eBay Motors, passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. It's Friday Eve, which means tomorrow, Friday, we got Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. I cannot wait to co-host that show once again. We'll talk about the biggest games, biggest storylines, which coaches are on the hot seat. We're streaming 11 a.m. to noon this and every Friday. It's on every Locked On College YouTube channel, including this one, Locked On Canes, streaming live. So check out Locked On College Football Kickoff Live tomorrow with myself, Drake Toll, and Kenton Gibbs. We're going to have a good time tomorrow talking about all the big games to come. Okay, so I thought this was cool. I was watching Mario Cristobal on the Mario Cristobal show on the Hurricanes YouTube channel, hosted by my pals Joe Zagacki and Don Bailey Jr. And something, Cristobal was asked about like the leadership council on the team and how that's been growing. And listen, Mario Cristobal, he won 2 national championships at Miami playing in the 80s and 90s. Those were the ultimate player-led teams, right? When you had people like Mario, people like the playmaker, Michael Irvin, Darren Smith, Jesse Armstead, like you had so many strong personalities on that team. And yeah, listen, as much as we love the Jimmy Johnsons and the Dennis Ericksons and the Howard Schnellenbergers, like when the players really take it amongst themselves to lead themselves and lead each other, that's what made the U great. That's what made the U special. Accountability and leadership from within, okay? Mario Cristobal said, quote, "You can only go so far with a coach-driven team. At some point in time, the players have to take over," he said. "Things are starting to happen that lead us to believe that a player-led team is going to be a reality." So he didn't say they're quite there just yet, but they're getting there. And I've been really impressed, not only with Cam Kinchins and Tyler Van Dyke. The two of them, I think, were the ones who organized some of the get-togethers last weekend to watch college football during the bye week, team unity, all that stuff. But I've been absolutely blown away with Matt Lee since he arrived. The center transfer from UCF instantly became a team leader. KJ Cloyd is a guy who I think has a lot of leadership chops. I really like the way that James Williams has been stepping up. I think he's been becoming a nice leader in that locker room. And CC maybe also, but Kiko Mauigoa, the older brother who comes in with that experience from Washington State, has added leadership as well. And then, of course, a guy like Javion Cohen, who played at a machine of a team and an offensive line at Alabama. He's, helping impart some of that wisdom on Miami. So hopefully, like Cristobal said, hopefully we're reaching a point where instead of the players looking for coaches, looking to coaches for orders and guidance and structure, you need to get a lot of that from within, right? And it's the coach's job when you're recruiting and you're acquiring players in the transfer portal to make sure you're bringing in those types of personalities. And then hopefully, even if some players may come in not necessarily as leaders or alphas, you try to develop that and you hope the leadership of some of the elder statesmen rubs off on them. So I love to hear that that's something that Mario Cristobal feels like is happening on that team, because that's something that's a gateway to greatness, right? You're not going to reach greatness if you don't get a self-led and self-driven team, a player-driven team, I should say. By the way, you guys remember the BCS, the old computer poll that used to decide the national championship rankings? Now, I had to explain what that was because some of you might be too young to remember the BCS. Now, the BCS, we don't necessarily like it in these parts because that computer, it definitely screwed Miami out of a national title appearance in 2000 because it made no sense that year. Miami had 1 loss. Florida State had 1 loss, and their loss was to Miami, and yet Florida State was in the championship game against Oklahoma. So, the BCS, it screwed Miami before, but apparently people still have access to the old BCS formula. Even though the BCS is no longer officially used, people still have access to the BCS formula. And maybe we need the BCS back because apparently the old BCS computer formula would actually have the Miami Hurricanes ranked number 1 in America right now. By the way, Florida still unranked. If you had the BCS, they're unranked in real life. They would be unranked in the BCS as well. Miami number 1, Texas number 2 would be the current BCS ranking. So listen, it's funny what happens when you take human bias out of the equation. I'm not saying I miss the BCS because sometimes you could take the C out of there and it was just strictly BS. But hey, the BCS has given Miami some respect in the way that the people aren't. Because like I saw, and one of my listeners sent this to me on our subtext chat. You can sign up to our subtext community, link in the show description below. Try it free for 14 days. So one of the big publications put out another one of these quarterback top 10 lists. No mention of Tyler Van Dyke still. I can understand the one that came out like 3 weeks ago, no mention of TVD, but I would have thought by now, number 1 graded quarterback in the country per Pro Football Focus, one of the most efficient passers in the country by any metric with 11 touchdowns, 1 interception, and a signature win already against Texas A&M. You would think Tyler Van Dyke would crack a top 10 list, right? He's still not cracking those top 10 lists, by the way. All right, so we get a question. And by the way, the questions are coming in on our exclusive subtext SMS texting community. So if you want to try it out and join the fun, because you get text messages directly from my phone to yours, you can ask me questions on there. I give you guys breaking news, recruiting scoops, all sorts of stuff. Click the link in the show description below. Try it free for 14 days. And then if you like it, after 14 days, you can opt in $4.99 a month. We give you a lot of extra added value on there. We get a question from D. Lane, who says, I read an article this morning where Dan Radakovich stated he would like to see the federal government get involved in the NIL situation. While that wouldn't be a bad idea, I'm sure it would cause more harm than good. He says, what's your take on this one, Donno? I'm a registered libertarian, so, I'm usually not a big fan of the federal government doing, more than they really have to do. But at the same time, I'll tell you who swayed me on this argument that there should be some kind of federal oversight. And to even say those words, it pains me, okay? But we have some good lawyer friends on this show, right? And one of my lawyer friends, Alan K. Fertel, we had a conversation about this a couple months back, and he said there's just a big problem. Every individual state having different laws and policies governing NIL, which gives some states massive advantages for the teams that play in that state, and then other teams have massive disadvantages if they don't have progressive NIL laws there. And then you've got teams that are playing within the same conferences, the same NCAA landscape, and yet the rules on what some schools can do with their NIL are so different than what others can do. Unfortunately, because obviously, usually when the government, puts their hands on things, it doesn't usually make things better. It usually makes things worse. But I think in this case, you need some sort of standard oversight. And if the only way that happens, because the NCAA, I don't think has enough power on their own to enforce something like that. If the federal government has to get involved, I don't know, man. I've been told that would actually do more good than harm. So we'll see what happens, because there are definitely some schools in certain states that are at heavy advantages or heavy disadvantages. Okay. We get a good question from Quan the Cane, who says, regardless of what happens the rest of this season, I believe we are a playoff team next year, he says. If you could pick 5 players to come back next year, guys who may leave but have eligibility left, to make us a national title contender, who would they be, he says. Let me give you my 5, all right? Like these are guys who have been, rumored that may leave early, may have a good enough season to leave early for the NFL. But if, I'm not telling any of them what to do, by the way. Go make the decision that's best for you. But if you're asking me, who are my 5 that could come back and help Miami win a title? My 5 would be Tyler Van Dyke, because, you'd be switching next year to a very inexperienced quarterback. TVD coming back next year would be a major luxury. Cam Kinchins, for obvious reasons, one of the best players in the entire country. I'd also say James Williams because I'd like to keep that safety duo intact if you're talking about trying to win a championship, and Miami's not particularly deep at safety. Matt Lee, I'd like him to, and I think Matt Lee will probably come back regardless. And then for my fifth, so that's 4 so far. For my fifth, I've been debating between Javion Cohen and Leonard Taylor because I could see both of those guys have been projected to leave a year early. Man, I might. Ooh, I know defensive tackle is a position of need for next year, but I don't know, man. I might even like Javion Cohen, just the idea of keeping most of that offensive line together. It's tough. Either Javion Cohen or Leonard Taylor for my number 5. It's my show, my rules. I don't have to give you 5. I'm going to give you 6. How about that? Javion Cohen and Leonard Taylor could both stay if I'm going to play this game. Oh, wow. All right. So, someone asked me who the most valuable transfer player has been so far. We get a question about, this is going to be fun to answer. My top 5 most hated schools. I don't have to think too hard about a few of those. That's for sure. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We're not done on this episode of Locked On Canes. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We are available free wherever you get your podcast and available free on YouTube. We do plan to have a Saturday episode this week to preview the Georgia Tech game. Obviously, we're going to have a Friday episode. We'll talk about some of the players to watch on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. And, some people have been like criticizing me for Donno. Why do you talk about this Georgia Tech like they have any chance to even bother Miami? This is going to be a blowout win. Why are you giving Georgia Tech all this manufactured respect? And like I saw some comments on social media because Tyler Van Dyke and Xavier Restrepo both spoke this week. You can catch those videos online of their media availability, and they were both like extremely respectful. At one point, Tyler Van Dyke, he said Georgia Tech has a great defense. And some people were like, why do these guys pretend they're about to play against the Alabama Crimson Tide? Like, I got news for you, man. Respecting your opponent, no matter who that is, right? Whether it's Georgia Tech or Bethune-Cookman. They were saying nice things about Bethune-Cookman a few weeks ago. That's just the right way to play it, bros. It's the right way to play it for so many reasons. First of all, did you guys not watch Miami lose to Middle Tennessee last year? It can happen. Now, I don't think something like that would happen to this team, but it's happened a year ago. It happened to Miami, getting upset by a team that had no business beating you. So you do not want to say anything that sounds like you're disrespecting your opponent, because if you don't show up mentally for that game and you get beat, and listen, Georgia Tech, I know they lost to Bowling Green last week. A couple weeks ago, they beat Wake Forest. Looked pretty good doing it. So, this is a team that I think is capable of giving Miami more trouble than some of you people out there think. Okay. And so, you don't want to give the other team bulletin board material. You want to be respectful, and you certainly don't want to talk trash about an opponent and make that a national storyline, because then you're putting the wrong type of attention on your team. So, Miami players are handling it the right way. Be respectful of your opponent. And you know what? Maybe Georgia Tech, maybe you're not playing Georgia this weekend. You're playing Georgia Tech. Mentally, you should prepare as if you're playing the Georgia Bulldogs, not the rambling wreck of Georgia Tech. So I've got no problem with that whatsoever. Get a question from our guy, Brett, the firefighter. And Brett, thank you so much for what you do. He says, who would you make your MVT, which is most valuable transfer player this year? He said most would say Matt Lee or Jaden Davis. How about Cam McCormick? He says, best tight end blocker of all time. The offense is so good in the top 10 because of our running game, and I believe because of his blocking and chip blocking. He says, I would probably pick Lee because of how important he is calling signals on the line. As they say, what a difference a year makes. Yeah, listen, you hit a lot of the good names. Like Jaden Davis. If you hadn't mentioned Jaden Davis, I would have mentioned Jaden Davis. You're spot on with the other guys you mentioned. I'm glad you're giving Cam McCormick some love, because people don't give him enough love. I'll throw in 2 more from what you said, okay? Javion Cohen he's been a godsend in that transfer portal. Like Javion Cohen, this is an NFL left guard who's playing left guard for our Hurricanes right now. He's that good. And I would also say Kiko Mauigoa he's been in contention because he's such a sure tackler, so quick and aggressive. At linebacker, he and Javion have been, two of the big reasons that Miami has gotten off to the really good start that they've gotten off to. We get a question from Stephen Castle who says, hey, if Tyler Van Dyke continues to put up the numbers he has so far, does he get a shot at the Heisman? Again, still, he's not getting any, he's played well so far. He's not gotten any national love whatsoever. However, he's got opportunities, right? He's got opportunities to hopefully beat Drake May head to head, to beat Clemson, which would be a big win, even though Clemson's already got a couple losses. He's got an opportunity against Florida State. So listen, these are tough games he has still on the schedule. If Tyler Van Dyke can win most of those games, all of those games, and look good doing it, the problem will take care of itself. And he can definitely get into that Heisman conversation, but he's going to have to get a couple signature wins and a couple more Heisman moments along the way. We get this question from Kane across the alley who says, what is your personal top 5 of most hated schools? His is number 1, Florida State, number 2, Ohio State, number 3, Florida, number 4, Notre Dame, number 5, Penn State. Okay, here's mine. All right. And I will admit, I can be a petty, salty guy. I had trouble coming up with a 5th. Top 4, very easy. All right. Number 1 for me, Florida. I've got that old school mentality. Gator flop. Gators taking Miami off of the schedule because they were too afraid to play us every year. I cannot wait to play them next year. It's going to be so much fun. Gators are my number 1. My number 2 is actually Notre Dame. And again, I go back to the 80s following this team. So I have an old school mentality. I actually debated whether Notre Dame was my number 1 or Florida was my number 1, but they're both up there in the top 2. Then number 3 for me, Florida State. Number 4 for me, Ohio State. And my number 5, man, can I troll and just say Colorado? Because of all the oversaturation. I mean, talk about oversaturation in the media. You turn on any, like I've had to watch less ESPN for the past couple of months because like they spend, well, I guess they've moved on now to Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, but for like a month, all they talked about was Coach Prime. And then I got to see all Miami's alumni on there on the sidelines and hugging Coach Prime. So I'm gonna troll and say Colorado for my number 5. How about that? Because I didn't have, Penn State is not a bad nominee, but I don't know. I'm gonna say Colorado. Oh man. All right, we're gonna have more questions answered on tomorrow's show. I'm gonna put out a mailbag written piece on allhurricanes.com. Make sure you check it out. People like Brian Smith, me, Chalupa Batman, Lefty Liam, Rowdy work really, really hard at allhurricanes.com. So check it out. I am going to publish a written mailbag on there. We'll answer some more of you guys' questions tomorrow. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. So again, Miami gets multiple crystal ball predictions for Ny Carr. Hopefully the Canes can close on his recruitment. Hopefully they can make a good impression on Jeremiah Smith this weekend. And we will talk to you guys again tomorrow on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.